So let me ask you this. When Lukashenko says he is, willing to share power, actually, through constitutional reform, I mean, is that a real concession of any sorts, or do more Belarusians see that as absolute desperation to hang on to power, and they'll continue to fight?
I think it's a little bit, too late for that, because Lukashenko has been in power for 26 years. And if he wanted to share power with a wider sections of society, for instance, with various groups which have slightly alternative views to him, he would have done so. And based on what we see in terms of political mobilization on the streets, and also in the factories, in the workshops and mines, we see that there is significant change in the public support, which is no longer with Lukashenko.
Right. I mean, is there any way he can survive this? Is there an alternative, some kind of power sharing agreement that could ever work? Or does he, at this point, is it becoming clear he needs to go?
I think one way to hang on is actually to increase repression and to crack down on the protests. We've seen that it didn't actually work last week, and crackdown generated larger protests. But we have to remember that during the protests over the weekend, there was no police presence. So police did not try to stop those very large protests in Minsk and across the country. If they use harsher methods, there's potential of, again, creating an atmosphere of fear, which for now is gone, but it might return.
Okay, how much can and will then the Kremlin continue to prop him up? I mean, they don't want Belarus turning into another Ukraine.
I think Kremlin is watching the situation very carefully, because they understand that they need to work with whoever is in power in Minsk. On the one hand, of course, they would prefer to have an authoritarian president, authoritarian leader whom they know and they know how to work with, such as Lukashenko. But on the other hand, they're concerned about the obvious lack of popular support for him in his own country. So I'm sure that the Kremlin is actually looking at both alternatives and is speaking to both parties, so not just Lukashenko, but most probably to the opposition as well, trying to figure out what is the best course of action, which would safeguard key Russian interests in the region.
And what about the opposition? I mean, we know that Tikhanovskaya is, of course, in Lithuania, still trying to lead from afar, but would she be willing to talk to players like Vladimir Putin, or is she waiting for her husband to come out of the wings and actually possibly take the reins in the near future?
Well, I think, if she actually becomes president, which it still remains an if, she would have no other way but to actually talk to Putin, because Russia and Belarus are linked by numerous economic, political, and military alliances. They're part of the so-called union state of Russia and Belarus. So whoever is in power in Belarus, even temporarily, as she insists she intends to be, only for a period of about 6 months, she would still need to talk to Russia.
Okay. I want to look quickly. I mean, we have another minute. So what we heard from Lukashenko just before we came to you, actually, what do you make of how he's verbally managing the situation? I mean, when he turns to protesters and insinuates that they actually don't know what they're doing because they don't really understand the rules of politics, do you think they're listening, or does that insult them in a sense?
Based on the reaction of protesters who are chanting "leave" to the president, he lost support, and people actually laugh at him, which is quite unfortunate when when you claim that you just won more than 80% of the vote. So I think based on what we're seeing right now in Minsk and other cities of Belarus, with the protests and especially with the strikes going on, his position is becoming increasingly untenable to keep the status quo and to remain in power for an extended period of time.
Okay, Alexander Kokcharov, great to have you. Thanks so much for speaking to us there from London.